If you're thinking about buying a Ford Bronco or you already have one and want to make the most out of the Bronco experience, this video is for you. I've daily driven, off-roaded, and modified mine over the past 2 years. And today I'm sharing everything I wish I knew before I bought mine, from model year changes to off-road essentials and features I would have spec'd differently. No matter where you are in your Bronco journey, there's something in this video to help you get the most out of it. First, let's talk engine choices. You've got two main options in the regular Bronco. The 2.3-liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder or the 2.7-liter EcoBoost V6. The 2.3 makes 300 horsepower and up to 325 pound-feet of torque. It gets slightly better fuel economy, costs less upfront, and if you're like me and want a manual transmission, it's the only engine that offers it. It's been totally fine for daily driving and off-roading. Even after upgrading to 35-inch tires, I'm still happy with it. But if you want more power, the 2.7-liter V6 might be worth considering. It bumps things up to 330 horsepower and over 400 pound-feet of torque, which definitely gives you better acceleration and a smoother ride, especially if you're towing. That said, both the 4-cylinder and the V6 have the same max towing capacity. It's really about how confidently the vehicle handles that load. Just keep in mind, the 2.7 only comes with an automatic, and you'll probably see about 2 miles per gallon less in fuel economy. Now, technically, there is a third engine option too, the 3.0-liter EcoBoost in the Bronco Raptor. It makes 418 horsepower and 440 pound-feet of torque, but it also costs quite a bit more, thanks to the 37-inch tires, live valve Fox shocks, and most options are included as standard. At the end of the day, all three engines are solid. It just depends on what matters more to you. Fuel savings, a manual option, extra torque for towing, or the ultimate off-the-showroom floor off-road performance. Now, despite loving my Bronco, I really wish I could have seen how many changes were coming, because if I had known what later year models might offer, I might have waited before buying my 2023. Originally, there was a base model that kept things simple and affordable, but by 2024, the entry-level option was discontinued and Big Bend became the new starting point, which made the whole lineup more expensive overall. There have been a few short-lived trims too, like the Everglades, which showed up in late 2022 and was gone after 2024. It came standard with the Sasquatch Package, a factory-installed snorkel for water crossings, and even a worn winch from Ford Performance. Around the same time, Ford introduced the Heritage line. There were two versions, a regular Heritage, which was basically a retro Big Bend with Sasquatch, and a limited version that was more like a retro-styled Badlands with Deluxe Package. Both had cool white accents, unique wheels, and that throwback style, but Ford only planned to build 1,966 of the limited. The good news is, as of 2025, you can still order a Heritage model, but two-door versions are no longer available. But on the bright side, newer Heritage Broncos now come standard with the big 12-inch touchscreen and a fully digital gauge cluster, like the rest of the lineup. There was also some important suspension upgrades over the years. In 2022, Ford introduced the Hoist 3.0 system as an optional package on the Wildtrak. By 2023, however, that upgraded suspension became standard on the Wildtrak. And by 2024, Badlands and Sasquatch Package Broncos also got the same heavy-duty steering rack from the Hoist 3.0 setup. In 2023, Ford also temporarily removed a few popular options, including the manual transmission. The good news is that the manual made a comeback in 2025. Ford brought the base Bronco back too, probably to make the lineup a little more accessible again. They also added a new Black Diamond package for 2025, which is now just an option on the Big Bend instead of being its own standalone trim like mine. There are some other nice updates too, like rear seat climate vents on 4-door models, better cabin insulation, and a new 12-speaker B&O sound system upgraded from the 10-speaker version in previous years. One of the coolest things for 2025 is the new factory-installed matte clear film. It gives any Bronco color a satin finish, and it protects the paint from road salts, bugs, and everyday grime. And finally, one of the big aesthetic upgrades for 2025 is that you can now get a body color painted hardtop. Earlier Broncos were stuck with the dark gray molded in color tops. Let's talk about the Sasquatch Package. The Sasquatch Package has been an option since launch, and it's a great way to boost the Bronco's off-road capability right from the factory. You get 17-inch wheels, some of which are beadlock capable, paired with 35-inch tires. It also includes the advanced 4x4 system that switches between two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive, a 4.7 final drive ratio for better crawling, and electronic locking front and rear axles to help with traction in sticky situations. The Bilstein shocks help smooth out rough terrain, and the high clearance suspension and fender flares give you more ground clearance overall. Pricing varies by trim, and it usually adds roughly $6,000 to $8,000 to the build because it actually costs more to add on lower trims like the base model. I've done my own lift and added 35-inch tires, but if it had been in the budget, I would have gone Sasquatch from the factory just for that peace of mind that everything's dialed in from the factory and the addition of that front locker. One of the most common questions I see online is, what's the biggest tire I can fit on a stock Bronco? And the answer really depends on your trim and also what wheels or tires you plan on using. Most non-Sasquatch Broncos can comfortably run up to 33 or 34-inch tire without rubbing, especially if you're sticking to stock wheels or something with a similar offset. Now, you can squeeze 35s on a stock Bronco, but that's where things get a little tricky. If you're only driving on pavement and remove the crash bars, it should work, but if you're planning to off-road, I definitely recommend adding at least a 2-inch lift, just to give the tires room to flex and articulate without causing any potential damage. And if you're thinking about 37s, usually a 3-inch lift is needed for most trims, or around 2 inches if you're starting with a Sasquatch model, since it already sits higher from the factory. So now that you know you'll probably need a lift for bigger tires, let's talk about your options, because not all lift kits are the same, and each come with trade-offs you should be aware of. The 3 most common lift options you'll see for Bronco are spacer lifts, body lifts, and coilover kits. Spacer lifts are usually the cheapest. They're small blocks that go on top of your shocks or springs to give you a little extra height. These are great if you just want the look and to squeeze in slightly bigger tires, but they don't improve performance. And in some cases, they can actually make steering components wear out faster if you go off-road hard. Then there's the body lift, which raises the body off of the frame using spacers. It lets you run bigger tires without messing with the suspension at all, so it doesn't affect ride quality. But you don't actually gain more ground clearance underneath the Bronco, and you might notice some weird gaps in the body lines. And finally, coilovers are the ideal upgrade for both performance and looks. They replace your stock shocks and springs with a high-performance system that's built to handle rough terrain and ride smoother than any spacer or body lift ever could. They're more expensive, and depending on how high you go, you might need upgraded control arms to keep everything aligned properly. I ended up doing Rough Country's 2.5-inch Vertex adjustable coilovers on my Bronco, and it totally changed how it handles both on the road and off of it. If you're planning to hit the trails regularly, a proper suspension setup like that is 100% worth considering. There are even more extreme options like portals or full long travel suspension, but for most Bronco owners, that's probably a little overkill. Here's something I really wish I had thought about before buying my Bronco, and that's having a way to lift off the hardtop. You can absolutely remove it with 2 people or even by yourself depending on your size and strength, but it's not exactly fun. I prefer something easy and seamless. You're also going to need somewhere to store the hardtop once it's off the Bronco. I started with a hardtop removal cart. It was a more affordable option, and believe it or not, there are a few different versions out there. Most of them aren't very 2-door friendly because of where the supports have to go to lift the top. So make sure it's compatible before you buy. In our case, the cart worked better than nothing. It made the removal process easier and helped solve the storage problem, but it also took up a lot of space in our garage. That's why we eventually switched to a ceiling-mounted hoist. The one we have is called the Fleximounts GL1. It's technically a ceiling storage rack, but it also works great for lifting the Bronco hardtop. You can crank it manually, or the way we use it is attach a drill to power it. It's much quicker and easier. With the right lifting straps, we can take the top off smoothly and store it out of the way without taking up any floor space. There are several lift options out there. If you're getting a hardtop, I definitely recommend budgeting for some kind of lift system. I'll leave a few good options in the description below. And since the Bronco is all about that open air experience, let's talk about the removable doors, because that is another area where I didn't fully know what I was getting into. Ford did a great job with the design of the removable doors for the most part, but just like the hardtop, you need to think about what you're going to do with them once they're off. The Bronco doors are light enough for most people to lift, but I've got to admit, the first time I took one off, I wasn't ready for how awkward it was going to be to hold, and I actually dropped the door. Luckily, I had the easy 4x4 door storage cart underneath, and it really softened the fall. No damage. Some people online haven't been so lucky. Ford does offer door storage bags, but the downside is you still have to lift and move the doors around. With the cart, I just roll it over to the Bronco, remove the doors, set them on the rack, and roll them into the garage. It's way easier in my opinion. Now, here's another quick tip. When you go to put the doors back on, Ford gives you these little alignment pins to help guide the door into place. But once the door is back on, removing the pin to reinstall the bolts can be kind of frustrating. That's why I recommend the easy 4x4 Bronco door alignment pins. They actually replace both the factory alignment pin and the bolt, and they make reinstalling the door so much easier. I've had them on the Bronco for a while now, and I've had no issues with how the doors open or close. I'll also leave a link for these down below. I think they're a must-have if you're going to take off your doors. Now let's talk about how I'd actually spec out a Bronco if I were buying one today. Because looking back, there are definitely a few features I do and don't regret getting. Like most people, I had a budget when I bought mine, and that really determined which trim I ended up with. But knowing what I know now, here's what I tried to swing for, whether you're buying new or shopping used. First up, the Sasquatch Package. Like I mentioned earlier, I've already installed 35s and a lift on my Bronco. And the reason I did that is every time I drove by or saw a Sasquatch Bronco, I thought, I want that. So I'd get the Sasquatch Package from the factory if it was in the budget. But here's the key part about the Sasquatch Package that goes beyond just the look. If you plan to off-road beyond just fire roads or dirt trails to a campsite, you really want at least a rear locker. My Black Diamond came with one from the factory, and I've definitely used it. That said, there have been times I really wished I had a front locker too. And that's something you can also get if you go Sasquatch. Having both front and rear lockers gives you way more capability when things get tricky. The bigger 12-inch screen is now standard, but it wasn't when I bought mine. Some people say they don't care about the bigger screen, but mine came with the base screen, and I've since upgraded it to the 12-inch screen. If I had the ability, I would have gone with a 12-inch screen from the start. It's not hard to upgrade, but just like getting the Sasquatch Package from the factory, it's nice not to have to do the work and spend the additional money. Also, if you go back and look at my review of my Bronco, one of the things I pointed out was that the gauge cluster had 2 speedometers for some reason. Well, they've now fixed that complaint with every Bronco getting essentially the Raptor's all-digital gauge cluster. So if you're looking at new 2025 or newer versus used, that's another thing to consider. One other option that I think gets overlooked is the aux or auxiliary switches. These provide a convenient pre-wired control system for powering and operating aftermarket accessories like off-road lights, compressors, or other electrical equipment you might want to add. Of course, there are aftermarket solutions, but having it right from the factory is a definite plus. From 2021 to 2024, auxiliary switches were a popular and affordable option on Ford Broncos. They eventually went up in price about $100, but by 2025, their availability has significantly decreased due to being limited to specific models and no longer being a standalone option. The audio system in the Bronco is something everyone loves to hate on. I thought it was okay when I got it, but doing a simple speaker upgrade really did make a difference. So I'd opt for the premium sound system that also has been beefed up since launch. It might not satisfy the true audiophiles out there, but if you don't want to have to think about it or don't want someone tearing up your new vehicle, it's a no-brainer. At last, I'd stick with the hardtop. Obviously, being a two-door, that was the only way Broncos currently come from the factory unless you purchase an aftermarket soft top and have it dealer installed. I am envious of how easy it is to go topless with the soft top, but the trade-off of wind noise and more interior cabin noise in general wouldn't have been worth it for me. There are some essential things you should have before you hit the trails. First and most importantly, Onyx Off-Road, our personal favorite for navigation and trail planning. It shows you legal trail access, difficulty ratings, and even offline maps when you're out of cell service. Next up is a set of tire deflators. Airing down your tires is one of the easiest ways to improve traction on sand, rocks, or loose surfaces, but doing it manually takes forever. With these, you preset the tire pressure, screw them on, and walk away. You'll also want a way to air back up afterward, so invest in a decent portable tire compressor that connects to your battery. Those little rechargeable ones from Amazon work in a pinch, but they can take 2 to 3 times as long per tire. So instead of 20 minutes, you might be standing around for close to an hour. Not fun after a long day on the trails. Safety gear is also important. A basic first aid kit should always be in your Bronco, along with extra water and some non-perishable snacks. Even on short day trips, things can go wrong or take longer than expected. I'd also throw in some recovery gear, but that depends on how you're planning to explore. If you're going out with others, a basic recovery kit is great. Something with a recovery rope and soft shackles. But if you're exploring solo, I'd recommend at least bringing some traction boards. That said, don't get overwhelmed by recovery gear when you're just starting out. If you decide you want to do more technical trails, you can invest in more gear over time. We had 0 recovery gear the first time we went out, but we knew what trail we were taking and what the conditions were like. It was basically a well-traveled fire road. Before we wrap up, let me share some hidden tech features that even Ford dealers don't always mention during the sales process. If your key fob dies while you're out somewhere, you can still start your Bronco. There's a slot in the center console where you can place the dead fob, and the truck will still recognize it and let you start the engine. Here's another one that surprised me. Even if you have a lower trim Bronco without remote start on your key fob, you may still be able to use the remote start through Ford Pass app. That is, if you have an automatic transmission. Since I have a manual, I can at least lock and unlock it through the app. And finally, if you hold down the unlock button on your key fob, all your windows will roll down automatically. Perfect for those hot summer evenings when you want to cool the Bronco down before getting in. Hopefully this video gave you a better idea of what to look for if you're buying, or what to upgrade if you already own a Bronco. If you've got tips of your own or questions I didn't cover, drop them in the comments. You'll find links to everything I mentioned down in the video description. If you want to see all the mods I've done to my Bronco, check out this video right here. And if you're into Bronco content like this, be sure to subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.